Welcome to the Betting Above the Rim podcast. Today's date, October 2nd, episode 86. In today's podcast, we get to a bunch of topics fresh off the trade completed Friday night. I shouldn't say completed, consummated Friday night. We're still waiting for it to be done. Blockbuster trade between the New York Knicks and the Minnesota Timberwolves. We'll break down the what happened with that trade and how it impacts Cat going to the Knicks, with Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo being the main pieces going to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Next, we stick in the NBA and talk about the life of Dikembe Mutombo, one of the more underrated centers in the history of the game, one of the top defensive players and the king of the finger wave. Also, some pretty good Geico commercial he was in not too long ago. Next, we go to stay in the NBA, and I give you my top 5 two guards going into the season. Just make sure it's two guards. Understand, it's a little tricky because teams like Dallas that play Luka and Kyrie, I don't count either one as a two guard. You look at Jimmy Butler, he's a small forward. We'll get into my top 5 two guards going into this season. Next, we recap the Game 2 win by the New York Liberty, 88-84. As they go up 2-0, we'll talk about Minnesota evening its series with Connecticut Sun at 1 game apiece. Then lastly, we get into our season previews. We'll preview the New Orleans Pelicans, the New York Knicks, I promise I'll be brief with this, and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let's get started in today's podcast. And I guess it's not breaking news because it happened on Friday night, as Karl-Anthony Towns, the pride of North Jersey, is returning home to his hometown team, the New York Knicks, in a trade the Knicks have been trying to do this for a couple of months. They finally acquire Karl-Anthony Towns from Minnesota, with the main pieces being Julius Randle, Donte DiVincenzo, and a first round pick via Detroit going to the Timberwolves. And when you think about this trade, let's start from a Knicks perspective. What are they getting out of Karl-Anthony Towns? Folks, they're getting, in my opinion, the best stretch 5 in the NBA. I'm not going to look at what he did the last 2 years playing with Rudy Gobert because he is a stretch 5. Folks, understand this. This is a 40% shooter from 3. Look at that form right there with that follow-through. Especially, he's a great shooter at the 3-point line in the corner. Look at the fact that his ability to run pick and roll, pick and pop situations. So what he does is he lengthens and stretches the floor for the New York Knicks as his ability to shoot the ball from 3. Now it gives teams things to look at. So who does it benefit in New York? Start with Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson now, instead of having Mitchell Robinson starting, you have Jalen Brunson with someone that is a pick and pop guy. Jalen Brunson is really good to the basket. And remember, folks, he was the only guard in the top 10 in scoring inside the paint. So now that JP can come off at his ball screen and you can pop Cat, now he's got driving lanes that makes him effective. Who else does this benefit? Well, it benefits both OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges. OG, who re-signed with the Knicks this year after being acquired for Toronto for Barrett and Quickly, getting OG now at that corner. Now you have two, I would say, premier corner 3-point shooters. The 3-point shot's really, really big in the NBA now, and you can shoot it from the corner really well. The Knicks will have 2 of the best of it with OG Anunoby and, of course, Karl-Anthony Towns. It also benefits Mikal Bridges, who came over from a trade from the Brooklyn Nets. Why? Because I think with Randle being gone and now you're moving Cat to the center, Cat at the center, OG at the 4, Bridges at the 3. I personally think that best suits them in their game. And that's also, folks, could be the best defensive front court in the NBA with 2 3-and-D stoppers in Bridges and obviously OG Anunoby working under Tom Thibodeau, who is, I think, in my mind, the best defensive coach in the NBA. And he goes back to his days of learning it from Jeff Van Gundy, being a part of those Knicks staffs in the late 90s and also working with Van Gundy in Houston. Also, who else is the benefit? Well, Josh Hart probably goes into the starting lineup, right? Josh Hart has become, I guess you call it the heart and soul of the New York Knicks team. Getting him in that starting lineup and allowing him, another guy that can punch the gap, not a great shooter, streaky shooter, but effective, but a guy that can punch the gaps. Without Mitchell Robinson starting and playing the bulk of the minutes, this allows them to kind of get into situations where Hart and Brunson can get downhill. A couple of other guys you have to think about really quick who would benefits are backups, right? Namely Deuce McBride and Tyler Kolek. Deuce McBride, who had some really big games down the stretch and in the playoffs, was shown himself to be a more than capable three-point shooter, but not a point guard, was slated to probably be that backup, maybe not getting as many minutes. So that helps them. Who else does it benefit? People want to talk about campaign. I think it benefits Tyler Kolek. I've been a big Tyler Kolek guy since out of Marquette. He's experienced, he's really savvy, and he's extremely effective in the pick and roll, and then he's a lefty. So that allows Tom Thibodeau to not really flip his offense too much when he goes into the game because everything will be same side of the floor as it was for Jalen Brunson. I expect big things out of Tyler Kolek, who I think was a steal for the Knicks to get in the second round. Let's flip over and let's talk about Minnesota, right? I have concerns. My number one concern is the fact that if Cat and Rudy couldn't play together, how can Randle and Rudy play together? Julius Randle is a bully ball guy. He's an ISO guy, and he needs space to operate. I wonder, unless they feel like McDaniels, obviously, and Ant and others can shoot the ball really well from three, I wonder how the spacing is going to work, especially with Rudy Gobert down low, clogging up the lane. There's also the fact of him being an ISO ball player. So now you have two guys that are big ISO guys, and Randle and Ant. Who's going to be the guy? Well, this is Ant's team. I also think that if you look at it from Minnesota's perspective, I thought if they would have made a trade for Cat, that maybe you would slide Jaden McDaniels to the four. I think McDaniels is like that OG Anunoby type. I don't think he handles it enough as a three, but he shoots it well enough, particularly at the corner, to be a four. One of the best defenders in the NBA. I thought it could have been better for McDaniels to be a four. But I like what they got in DiVincenzo. Dante DiVincenzo that had a really great second half of the year. I think he was number one or number two at three-pointers made in the NBA in the second half of the year after the All-Star break, particularly after the trade when he kind of slid himself into the starting lineup. Dante, that when he gets hot, it's like Dante's Inferno. He can get cooking. But if you're starting Conley, and you know Ant is the guy that drives the ship, Anthony Edwards, who I'll talk about in a little bit in regards to my top two guards in the NBA, with McDaniels, with Randle, with Gobert, now you probably bring DiVincenzo off the bench. How does that affect the two rookies that I was so high on draft night? And that's Rob Dillingham and that's Terrence Shannon Jr. Both of those guys had great years, obviously Dillingham at Kentucky, and then the experience of Shannon Jr. playing at Illinois. Those two guys, how does this affect their development? I figured DiVincenzo is going to take a bulk of the minutes. DiVincenzo can also play a little bit of point. Now, there's been a little bit of talk about maybe Dillingham struggling to adjust to the point guard role. Rob Dillingham, that's such an explosive scorer, can attack the basket, can really get his own shot off. It'll be interesting to see how it affects him. It may affect Shannon Jr. less if you're sliding DiVincenzo to the one. Obviously, Terrence Shannon Jr., that is actually dynamic offensively and defensively. So we'll see how it works. I think it's a little bit of a work in progress. Do both teams win? Yes. I don't think at the end of the day Minnesota could have afforded to keep Cat, Rudy, and Ant with that amount of money. I'm going to say this. I'm probably the only person who will say this. Let's see what happens with this contract with Julius Randle. This is his last year, and I think there's an option for next year. Julius Randle becomes one of the most attractive players who could get traded during this season. But for the Knicks, I think they hit a home run, and we'll talk about their preview in a little bit. Speaking of the New York Knicks, we lost a legend 2 days ago. with the loss of Dikembe Mutombo, a Hall of Famer out of Georgetown, 6-time All-Defensive Team, 8-time All-Star, led the league in blocks 3 times, led the league in rebounding twice, 4-time DPOY, and 3-time All-NBA. Played for Denver, Atlanta, Philadelphia, the Nets, the Knicks, and the Rockets. And when you think about Mutombo, he was one of the greatest defensive centers in the history of this game. And when you look at who he had to go up against every night, the Olajuwons, the Shaqs, later in his career, the Yao Mings, later in his career, Dwight Howard, obviously his Georgetown brothers. And really quick, I want to give a shout out to John Thompson. John Thompson, who won the 1984 national championship with Georgetown and became the first black head coach to win a national championship. John Thompson, think about this, had within a decade, Patrick Ewing, Dikembe Mutombo, and Alonzo Mourning. And you've always heard about the stories about the 3 of them and the battles that they would have in the summer and the trash talking and all that stuff. But as great as Mutombo's accolades are on the court, what he did, especially for the continent of Africa, and bringing basketball back then, and the amount of money he brought back to Africa to build schools, to help the poor, and really become that ambassador, I would say, for the U.S. to Africa in regards to basketball. I don't know if we have a Luol Deng if we don't have Dikembe Mutombo. I don't know if we have a Masai Ujiri who cried talking about Dikembe Mutombo. There was a great piece that Jaren Jackson Jr. talked about, the fact that Jaren Jackson Jr.'s father was Mutombo's roommate and the impact that Mutombo had on him. But the secret thing about Mutombo that people don't know about is how funny he was. The trash talking, the no, not today. I think we lost an icon. An icon on and off the basketball court, and I would dare to say one of the most influential basketball players of his generation for what he did off the court. We lost a great one. We lost a great one way too early. Rest in peace to the great Dikembe Mutombo. Moving on, I wanted, as we got through the NBA, as they're obviously starting in a couple of weeks, give you my top 5 at every position. Last week, we did the point guards. This week, the 2 guards. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time because I want people to look at this and debate where they have these guys. Number 5, Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown had won a championship ring this past year for the Boston Celtics. Jaylen Brown now was an MVP of the Eastern Conference Finals and the NBA Finals. Jaylen Brown that has really become a big-time player for Boston. Number 4, Paul George, PG, I guess we call it PG-8. It was PG-13. Playoff P is now obviously with the Philadelphia 76ers as the Philadelphia Sixers try to win an NBA championship for the first time since 1983. Paul George, that's a dynamic scorer, and it'll be interesting how he's used because he's going to be the number 3 scorer with Embiid and Maxey. But Paul George that could also literally take over games at times. And I think him as a number 3 scoring option is extremely scary because his ability to shoot the ball from 3 and his ability to create off the bounce. Number 3, Devin Booker, Phoenix Suns. I don't want this. I'm not putting him as a point guard. I know they played him as a point. Devin Booker is not a point guard, folks. Devin Booker is a 2 guard. His ability to shoot the ball and play in a pull-up game is absolutely dynamic. When you look at Phoenix, they're a team that's the big enigma all the time since acquiring Kevin Durant. Obviously, with Booker, with Bradley Beal, with Kevin Durant, with Yusuf Nurkic, could this be the year that Phoenix gets themselves back to the NBA Finals? I am so big and so high on Devin Booker. I just want him to be played the right way. You got to pair him up with a point guard that allows him to be the scoring guard that he can be, but he also has the ability to create. Now, Can he get you 5, 6 assists a night? Absolutely. I don't want him to be as a point guard. Put him on the second side of the floor. Let the action come. Let him get the ball and let the book cook. Number 2, Donovan Mitchell. Now, Donovan Mitchell is a small 2 guard, and I want to give Donovan Mitchell props. So, when he went to Cleveland, everybody thought that it was just going to be, he's going to be routed to the Knicks. He probably did want to go to the Knicks, but obviously with the Knicks and what they've gotten in Jalen Brunson, doesn't become attractive. So you know what he did? He signed up to stay. And I think that's so important because as much as we want the New Yorks and the Miamis and the Philadelphias and the Chicagos and the Detroits and the LAs to compete, it's good to see the Oklahoma Cities. It's good to see the Clevelands. It's good to see the Minnesota Timberwolves. It's good to see Oklahoma City Thunder, I think I already mentioned, right? It's good to see those Portland, San Antonio, Utah. It's good to see those small market teams compete. And it's better to see when small market stars don't leave and go somewhere else. He's the number 2 guard on this list. This list was incredibly difficult and it's incredibly fluid because I could make the case for any one of these guys to be number 1. But there's only one. My number 1 2 guard going into this year is Anthony Edwards. I expect an MVP type season for Ant-Man. We'll see how it works with Randall. But Anthony Edwards is so dynamic scoring the ball. I think it's really important that we put him where he is, which is number 1. His ability, I think his defense has gotten better. He's big, he's athletic, he can shoot the ball from 3. He can create off the bounce, and I'm hoping that he takes that next step. We could see this team in the NBA Finals. I think there's a chance. They got to figure it out with Randall, but I think there's a chance. Really quick to recap. Number 5, Jaylen Brown. Number 4, Paul George. Number 3, Devin Booker. Number 2, Donovan Mitchell. And my top 2 guard going into the 24-25 season, Anthony Edwards. Let's jump to the WNBA really quick and just recap the 2 Game 2 wins from Tuesday night. First, New York Liberty with an 88-84 win over the Las Vegas Aces. The key is this is New York Liberty now leads 2-0, and the Las Vegas Aces become the first team in WNBA history that a defending champ is down 0-2 in the playoffs. Why are the Liberty winning this series right now? Number 1, it's been the play of Sabrina Ionescu, who was absolutely fantastic, particularly in the fourth quarter when she was cooking. 24 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 50% from the floor. And the reason why I talked about liking the New York Liberty going into this series and going into this whole playoff run was I thought that Sab had taken the next step. People keep talking about how great Caitlin Clark. This is Caitlin Clark before Caitlin Clark. And she is on the big stage, and she's showing up and showing out. Second reason is the play of Jonquel Jones. Double-double game 1. Game 2, I think she had 14 and 8, if I'm not mistaken. Jonquel Jones is an absolute nightmare for the Las Vegas Aces that they can't figure out. The third reason why the Liberty are up 2-0 is not the play of Asia Wilson, who was fantastic with 24.7 rebounds, really came on strong in the second half, particularly the fourth quarter. To me, it's been the maddening play of Kelsey Plum. I think that Kelsey Plum has not been effective. Let's be honest, Kelsey Plum was downright awful in game number 2. And we talked about this, the shooting of Plum, the shooting of Gray, and the shooting of Jackie Young, particularly from the three-point line, is going to be important. Kelsey Plum was, I think, 3 of 9 or 2 of 9 from the floor last game, and she must be better in this series. Jackie Young, she played pretty well, 6 out of 16, but the key is that she was did not shoot the ball well from 3, so they need Jackie Young to play at her level, and I think that's the thing that's going to be tough for this team is can they string together 3 straight games when they have not done it? Obviously, that 88-84 win was pretty close, but a little bit better from 3. Obviously, the 3 of them combined to shoot I think it's 9 out of 22, 9 out of 23 from three. But Kelsey Plum, 2 out of 9 from the floor. Just not good enough. Guys, I don't think they're good enough. I think they can win game 3. I think that Liberty closed out in 4. Next, we had the game that was really a great game, very physical game. Minnesota winning 77-70 last night. The key here is Nafisha Collier was downright dreadful, awful. But they really locked indeed her up. Nafisha only went 3 out of 14 from the floor, 9 points. But it was a play up to others. Smith with 15, McBride with 11, and the biggest one, Courtney Williams with 17 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. To offset what I thought was a really good game by Alyssa Thomas, who did really well with 18, 10, and 7. Here is the key. Game 1, Connecticut shoots 40% from 3, they win. Game number 2, they shoot 25% from 3. Which Connecticut Sun team stands up at the game number 3 on Friday night? That's going to be the biggest key. Whichever team wins the 3-point battle is going to win the game because it's going to be low scoring. Do note, on Friday, look for me to drop my scouting report on the Sports Grid app, and I will have my plays for that. Look for that to come out early Friday morning. Let's quickly pivot back to the NBA, and let's go through some previews really quick. First, let's start off with the New Orleans Pelicans, who won 49 games last year. Their over-under is 45.5. Odds to win the Southwest Division are plus 340, 7-1 to win the West, 18 to win the NBA Finals. And I've just got to ask this to the public. Why is a team that won 49 games last year, their over-under is down this year? In a division in the Southwest where I have questions about Dallas, by the way, just announced this before, Luke is out for a week. I mean, we know he's not in great shape. It's probably because of the fact that people look at that division and they look for teams to be better, namely Houston and Memphis. That is the reason why you have this at the odds that you have it right now. I am a big fan of this Pelicans team. I think this is a team that, with the addition of DeJounte Murray, will be better. I think this is a guy that has the ability to be a point guard and really move C.J. McCollum to his proper position. So I do like this trade and getting him over there. So when you start looking about where can you find yourself a bet, right? Where is the play here in regards to this team and this game? To me, it's very simple. What are the odds for this team to make the playoffs? Because I definitely think that is the angle you should be looking for here is, can they make the playoffs? And I think they will. I think this is going to be a team that's going to be better than people think. I think they're going to be extremely competitive. And arguably, you could call this top to bottom. I know people talk about the Pacific. I think this could be I'm going to say maybe the most overall competitive division. If you look at it, you know, the odds to make the playoffs for the Pelicans are minus 188. So I don't think that's where, you got to look. I think the look is, and depending on what the odds are, and I don't know if it's going to find it much better, is they're plus 150 to make the play-in tournament. I think that's where it is. I think they're just outside of that top 6. And I think it's going to be really tight in that race. But I think they're finished 7-10. If you want to take a stab at something, take a look at them at plus 150 to make the play-in tournament. You get a nice little soft landing spot for seeds 7 through 10. Moving on to the New York Knicks. Lord have mercy, I could spend all day talking about this. 54.5 wins. Odds to win the Atlantic Division plus 270. Odds to win the East 3-1. Odds to win the NBA Finals 7.5 to 1. Oh boy, this is going to be tough for me to stay on task because I got to wrap this up soon here. Let me say this. If there's something I'm going to bet with the Knicks, I'm going to just keep it simple. I'm going to bet their win total over 54.5 wins. I know people are saying that it's going to be less. I think this trade puts them over the hump. I think what the Knicks did is when they got Karl-Anthony Towns in this trade, they looked at Boston and said, how can we compete with them? Right? How do we compete with them? Well, easy. We go and get 2 lockdown defenders and Bridges and obviously OG. And then we go get someone that's a stretch 5 that can offset what Porzingis does. And now make Porzingis have to go out to the 3-point line where he can't protect the basket. And now we get driving lanes for Brunson and Hart. The reason why I like this over 52.5 is if there's someone that's going to take the regular season too seriously, it's Tom Thibodeau. I like the Knicks to go over 52.5 wins. I can spend all day on this. My producer, Matty George, is telling me I got to wrap it up. So we're going to wrap it up and not talk anymore about the Knicks. But I'll talk about really quickly is Oklahoma City Thunder. Over 56.5 wins. Odds to win the Northwest Division, I should say, should be minus 120. Odds to win the West, and then the odds to win the NBA Finals. That should be the Western Conference. I don't think that should be the Eastern Conference unless they move conferences in the last couple of hours. But here's the key here. Oklahoma City is going to make it to the NBA Finals. I thought they were the best team in the West. They were not experienced. And if there were 2 things that I thought that Oklahoma City needed, they needed to get a lockdown defender on the perimeter. There'd be another 3-and-D guy or another defender at the guard spot to go along with Lou Dort and SGA. Check. Go ahead and they got that with Alex Caruso, who is an absolute dog on defense and will be absolutely fantastic in Oklahoma City. The other is they needed a rim protecting big because I didn't like Chet as a 5 and I'm worried about Williams. So getting Hartenstein, who is going to shore up the center position and be a starter after getting a 3-year, $87 million contract, him and that little push-up, but his ability to defend the rim, he's one of the premier, once he shot blockers, rim protectors, and players don't shoot high percentages around the paint with him around. I also think you're going to see something out of Hartenstein that you didn't see in New York. Hartenstein, when he was with the Clippers, showed an ability to make the 3-point shot. He's a lot better shooter than you think, and I do think Mark Daigneault will allow him to shoot the ball from 3, and I think he's going to make Chet even more dangerous defensively. I do like the Oklahoma City Thunder to win the Western Conference. So really quick to look at it, plus 150. I like for New Orleans Pelicans to make the play-in tournament. I like the New York Knicks win total over 52.5 games. And I like the Oklahoma City Thunder to win the Western Conference. This has been your Betting Above the Rim podcast for October 2nd. For all things sports gambling, download that Sports Grid app. Pre-game, in-game, post-game, props, predictions, and more from the very best in the sports gambling industry. Next week's podcast, we'll get into the top 5 small forwards. We'll continue our NBA previews, and then we'll also maybe be looking at the WNBA Finals for my producer, Matty George, Vinny, who does a great job with graphics. Thank you for listening, folks. And remember, it's smarter to be on Sports Grid. Good night.